If you actually counted the hours you've spent maintaining your backyard this summer, mowing, weeding, watering, pruning, replanting, hauling stuff in and out, and then you counted the hours you've actually sat out there with a drink, doing nothing, just enjoying it, the second number would embarrass you. That's the trap of owning a yard. You buy it for the second number. You end up living in the first one. And the wild thing is, a whole lot of homeowners are quietly flipping that math right now. They're swapping out the high maintenance stuff for features that basically run themselves, and they're getting their weekends back. None of these are expensive tricks. None of them are some new invention. Most of them are just smarter versions of stuff you already have in your yard, but in the wrong form. So let me walk you through what's actually working, because once you see what the low maintenance yards have in common, you genuinely can't unsee it. The biggest one, and this is the one that changes everything once people commit to it, is native plants. Here's the deal with native plants. They evolved to grow in your specific area. Your soil, your rain, your sun, your bugs, which means once they're in the ground and established, usually one season, they basically take care of themselves. You don't have to water them after that first year. You don't have to fertilize them. You don't have to baby them through August. The wildlife already knows what to do with them, so the pollinators show up on their own. Suddenly you've got butterflies and bees in the yard doing free work for you. The catch nobody tells you about native plants is that the first season can look a little rough. They're putting down roots, not putting on a show. By year 2, they're filling in. By year 3, the yard looks lush and you barely touched it. People walk by and assume you've been gardening every weekend. You haven't. If you're on the East Coast, look up coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, switchgrass, milkweed. Out west, California, fuchsia and manzanita and deergrass. Southwest, agave and yucca and desert marigold. Your local extension office will hand you a regional list for free. It's actually kind of a fun rabbit hole to go down once you start. Then there's the lawn question, and this one's the elephant in the yard, because for most people, the lawn is where 90% of the weekly hours go. Mow, edge, water, fertilize, weed, repeat, forever. A lot of folks right now are quietly cutting their lawn footprint in half. Not getting rid of it entirely. Most kids still want a patch to run around on. Most dogs still need somewhere to go, but they're shrinking it. The space they reclaim becomes planted beds, gravel paths, ground cover, whatever requires almost zero work. The replacement that's blowing up right now is creeping thyme. It stays around 3 inches tall, so you never mow it. It blooms purple. It smells incredible when you walk on it, like an Italian hillside. It loves sun. It handles foot traffic. And once it's in, it just spreads. Same deal with creeping sedum, microclover, chamomile, depending on your zone. They're not lawn replacements for a whole football field. But for the strips, the side yards, the awkward zones between pavers, they replace mowing entirely. And once you've never mowed something for a full summer, you start eyeing other patches of lawn like, what if that one went too? This next one, I genuinely don't understand why more people don't know about drip irrigation. I'm not exaggerating when I say a basic drip kit from a hardware store is $40 to $100. You snake it around your beds, plug it into your spigot with a cheap timer, and it waters everything exactly the right amount at exactly the right time without you doing anything. No more dragging hoses at 7 in the morning. No more guilt when you forget for 3 days. No more sprinklers blasting water onto the sidewalk. The first time you come back from a long weekend and your beds look exactly the way you left them, you'll wonder why you weren't doing this years ago. I'm not kidding. It's the kind of thing that changes how you feel about leaving your house. While we're on equipment that does the work for you, robotic mowers. I know, the first time you hear about these, you think it sounds gimmicky. It's not. The newer ones, Husqvarna Automower, Works Landroid, the GPS-guided ones that don't even need a perimeter wire anymore, handle a normal-sized lawn completely on their own. You press a button. It mows a tiny bit every day. The grass never gets long enough to look mowed. It just stays at a perfect height permanently, like having a fresh haircut every morning instead of once a month. They're not cheap up front. Entry models start around $800, Premium ones run a couple of grand. But you stop paying for gas. You stop sharpening blades. You stop spending Saturday mornings doing the loud, sweaty, hour-and-a-half routine. People I know who've made the switch will never, ever go back. They look at you like you're crazy for still pushing one around. Now this next one, I personally fell hard for the moment I tried it. Composite decking. If you have a wood deck, you already know the routine: power wash, sand, stain, reseal. Replace the board where a knot popped out once or twice a year minimum if you want it to last. By year 10, you've spent half the cost of a new deck just keeping the old one alive. Composite decking, Trex, TimberTech, Azeki, all those cost more upfront, but you basically never touch it again. You spray it off with a hose twice a year and you're done. No staining, no splinters in your kid's foot, no replacing boards in 5 years. And the new versions look so realistic. I've stood on decks and genuinely had to look twice to tell if it was wood. Most warranties are 25 years and transferable. Like actual transferable, not the fine print kind. If you're building or rebuilding a deck this year, this is the move. Don't even think about it. Hardscape paths are the next one I want to bring up because every single time I see someone mowing one of those tiny grass strips next to a driveway, I think, wait, why is that grass even there? It's contributing nothing. It's just a maintenance tax. The move is replacing those random grass strips with gravel, decomposed granite, pavers, stepping stones with creeping thyme between them. Anything that stays put. You're not redoing the whole yard. You're spotting the high-maintenance, low-reward grass zones and quietly turning them into things that run themselves. A bag of decomposed granite is 20 bucks. A few pavers are cheap. You can do a side yard in one Saturday and never edge it again for the rest of the time you own the house. Now this is something most people get backwards, and it's huge. Picking the right shrubs makes a bigger difference to your maintenance time than almost anything else in the yard. Most people grab fast-growing shrubs because they fill in quickly. It makes sense in the moment. The problem is they keep growing fast, which means you're out there with the pruners 4 times a season, forever, just keeping them from eating your windows. Slow-growing shrubs do the opposite. They settle in at the size you wanted them and basically stay there. The shrubs that quietly run the low-maintenance world right now are dwarf Japan holly, inkberry holly, dwarf Japanese holly, tater-tot arborvitae for vertical accents, and little lime hydrangea, which is honestly one of the best plants ever invented for people who don't want to fuss with deadheading. You plant them. 5 years later, they look basically the same shape. You're not out there with pruners every other weekend wondering what happened to your Saturday. Same conversation, different format. Perennials versus annuals. Annuals are the petunias, marigolds, impatiens. You buy in flats at the garden center every spring. They look great. They also die in October, every year. So you're spending money and Saturdays replanting forever. Perennials come back. You plant them once. Salvia, daylilies, coneflowers, sedum, hostas, peonies, lavender. Plant them once. They show up again next spring on their own. Plant them twice if you want them somewhere new. Then they just live their lives. I get the appeal of annuals. They're cheerful. They look amazing in the first month. But if low maintenance is the actual goal, every flat of annuals is a little ongoing commitment that compounds. Switch to perennials and your whole spring gets radically easier. Okay, this next one is just fun. Smokeless fire pits. The standard fire pit is a maintenance situation when you really look at it. Hauling firewood, cleaning out ash. Smoke blowing right into the seating area, which is the whole reason nobody actually uses the fire pit they spent $2,000 on. The smokeless models, Solo Stove being the famous one, and a bunch now, solve all of that with smarter airflow. You drop a few logs in, light it, and there's basically no smoke. Ash cleanup is wiping it out with a brush. Some of the newer ones have a removable bottom you can just dump. People who switch to smokeless fire pits end up using them 3 or 4 times more often than the old kind. Same concept. Way less work, way more nights spent out there. The last one I want to talk about isn't usually called low maintenance, but it absolutely is, and it's strategic shade. Here's the connection nobody makes. Plants that get the wrong amount of sun die. Then you replace them. Then they die again. Half of what people call yard maintenance is actually plant replacement because the plants are stressed and not thriving. A well-placed pergola, a shade sail, even one well-positioned tree completely changes the microclimate of a section of your yard. Suddenly, the plants under it are happy. They don't need as much water. They don't fry in August. They live for years instead of needing replacing every season. It's also why patios with overhead cover get used more. Less plant stress in the planters around them, less sun damage to your furniture, less burning skin while you're sitting there at 3 in the afternoon. One pergola or sail quietly fixes 3 or 4 maintenance problems at the same time. A pergola runs about $4,000 installed. A shade sail is under $500. Either one quietly cuts your replacement plant budget in half over the next 10 years, and you stop noticing it as work. A landscape designer told me something at a job site a few years ago that I keep coming back to. She said the easiest yards she ever designs are the ones where the owner finally admits what they actually want. Most people, she said, ask for low maintenance, but secretly want the yard to look like a magazine. And those two goals fight each other constantly. The moment someone accepts that low maintenance means a little wilder, a little more natural, a little less perfectly manicured, the whole project gets easier. The native plants come in, the lawn shrinks, the smart equipment takes over, and by year 2, they're out there with a glass of wine at 5 o'clock instead of holding a weed whacker at noon on a Saturday. Honestly, that's the whole picture. That's what people are obsessed with this summer. Not a perfect yard. A yard that hands them their life back. If this one clicked, the video I'd actually watch next is the one I did on outdoor living room mistakes. Because the second your yard stops eating your weekends, the next real question is how you set up the space to actually use it. The seating, the rug, the lighting, the way everything fits together. People nail the low maintenance side and then put one sad little chair in the middle of all that effort and wonder why they still don't go out there. That video walks through the other half of the equation. I'll drop it right here. Genuinely worth 15 minutes before you start spending money on furniture. See you over there.